Hello, everyone. Very warm welcome to all of you, to our amazing panelists and speakers, to our audience in person and virtually, to the Rio Conventions Pavilion event here at COP26 on food systems and the role of the Rio Conventions on biodiversity, climate, and land. My name is Kehkashan. I am a UNCCD land hero. I am also a UN human rights champion and the founder president of Green Hope Foundation. And I am delighted to be your moderator for this event that, as a UNCCD land hero and a young person, I'm really looking forward to and really enthused about, because we have with us really an amazing panel of speakers who are technical experts as well as representatives from governments, from the UNCCD, from WWF, UNFCCC, and the CBD. So we're looking forward to a very, very fruitful discussion today. Now, we are here at COP26, and we all know how anthropogenic climate change is the greatest existential crisis of our time. And we have also seen how anthropogenic climate change has its roots literally and figuratively in the manner of exploitation that Western economies particularly have put on, and the burden they've put on global South and least developed countries, that has really led to a destabilized food system, ecological system, that has led to biodiversity loss. And of course, all of these impacts have been exacerbated by climate change. And what's worse is that there are also social inequities that have arisen from this unholy trifecta of climate change, biodiversity loss, and land degradation. So now it is crucial that we come together and dwell upon and find concrete solutions to how we can mitigate climate change, achieve land degradation neutrality, stop biodiversity loss, and ensure that our most vulnerable communities and ones affected most by this trifecta are not left behind, and that we are able to have sustainable, healthy, and equitable food systems for all. So we have seen how the pandemic has caused some regression in the progress that we previously made on the SDGs in this regard, but at the same time, it's also given us this kind of new opportunity that calls for multilateralism, that calls for us working together in partnerships. We saw some of that at the 76th UN General Assembly, the Food Systems Convention that was convened, and I think some of our panelists will be talking about that, where it really spoke about how we must redefine our food systems in connection to addressing climate change, biodiversity loss, and land degradation. So, and most importantly, we need all of our stakeholders to come together. So I'm really happy that today we have stakeholders from literally across the spectrum here to put forward their unique perspectives. And then we will be able to see how we can work together to create this holistic movement towards sustainable, healthy, and equitable food systems in connection with all of the Rio Conventions. So with that, I'll just begin by introducing each of our speakers and panelists, and then I shall give the floor to our keynote address. So today, our keynote address will be given by the Honorable Amie Fabureh, who is the Minister of Agriculture of the Gambia. And the keynote will be followed by a technical discussion wherein our discussants are Martina Fleckenstein, who is the Global Policy Manager of Food at WWF International, Salimul Haq, who is the Director of International Center for Climate Change and Development in Bangladesh, Juan Restrepo, who's joining us online, the Director General of the Alliance of Biodiversity International and the International Center for Tropical Agriculture. And after that, we shall open it up to you, the audience, for a short Q&A session, after which we shall have a second panel of reflections and responses from Patricia Combo, my fellow UNCCD land hero, David Cooper, who is the Deputy Executive Secretary of the CBD, Motsumi Maljane from the UNFCCC Secretariat, and with a special participation from Agnes Kalibata, who is is the Special Envoy of the UN Secretary General for the Food Systems Summit. So with that, I'm delighted to be in such august company. I would like to now request the Minister to please deliver her keynote address. Minister, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as the Minister of Agriculture and convener of the National Food System Dialogues in the Gambia, I have the singular honor and the privilege to deliver a keynote message at this important gathering of the Coalition on Climate Resilient Development Pathway Food System Beyond 2030. The implementation of Rio Convention is very critical to attainment of sustainable food system, while at the same time reducing the negative and unsustainable agricultural practices. Cognizant of this fact, the Gambia government is committed to the Rio Convention at the highest policy level and at the implementation of projects and the programs towards the attainment of their objectives. In addition, all the institutions that are relevant in agriculture and the natural resource domain are significant to the realization of the goals of the convention. The government of the Gambia, through the coordination of the Ministry of Agriculture, has just completed an all-inclusive participatory food system dialogues. This has culminated to the National Food System Pathway and the strategy. The pathway will guide us in the transformation of the food system to leverage the power of the food system in the attainment of Agenda 2030. And the dialogue outlined 7 major outcomes: increased access to land, financing, and other productive resources that specifically target women and youths and differently able persons. Second, increase the efficiency and the effectiveness of the health delivery system. Third, sustainable exploitation of the country's natural resources base. Fourth, increase food production by 100%. Fifth, a harmonized and a better coordinated policy environment that direct or indirectly affect food system. The sixth one, more private sector involvement in the food system. And this aspect is very key. Without private sector, it will be difficult for us to be self-sufficient in food production. Seventh, introduction and the promotion of national food reserve government to fulfill its international fiscal obligations. Chairperson, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in the Gambia, we are much cognizant of the fact that unsustainable agricultural practices lead to drives a biodiversity loss, and that food systems are responsible for up to 30% global emission. These challenges are interconnected. Therefore, to achieve SDGs, we need to redesign our food system through agroecological approaches that minimize pressure on biodiversity, climate change, land and water, shift to climate-smart agriculture. Just as the theme for this year World Food Day commemoration is our actions, our future, better production, better nutrition, and a better environment and a better life. I think this year World Food Program team has covered everything. And today we need nature to survive. We must restore our balance with nature, which we have been long ignoring. Protecting and restoring nature can help drive a green recovery and prevent future pandemics. Investing in natural-based solutions will allow us to build forward better, greener, healthier, stronger, and more sustainable. On that note, I thank you very much for your kind attention, and I know today's program will be a very important dialogue, because if you talk about food system in any of our country, it means we need to invest in agriculture to be self-sufficient in food production. And secondly, without addressing climate issues across the world, it will be difficult for countries to be self-sufficient in food production. Climate issues are real. They are very real. We need immediate action to be taken. Countries need resources, and the resources have to be allocated to partners who are supposed to implement climate issues in the country. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Absolutely, we must invest in building sustainable food systems and nature for humanity and the planet. And I really like the point you made about, COVID-19 and the relation there as a zoonotic disease, because unless we address climate change, biodiversity loss, and land degradation, COVID-19 will just be the first of many zoonotic diseases that will just wreak havoc on the planet and on us as human beings, and also wreak havoc on our food system. So yes, we need sustainable, healthy food systems, and we need to address that unholy trifecta as soon as possible. So thank you once again, Your Excellency, for your remarks. And with that, we shall now move on to our panel discussion. So first, I would like to invite Martina Fleckenstein from the WWF to share your remarks, and we'll just give you a mic. So she will be talking to us about nature-positive food production. Over to you, Martina.
Yes, thank you. And thank you also for your inspiring words and listening in how governments also are emphasizing the importance of a food system transformation. And I know I'm repeating things, but I think we cannot often enough repeat the importance that we will not limit global warming to 1.5 if we won't stop loss of biodiversity, loss of land degradation, and if we won't change our food system. And I think what is also important is if we talk about food system, we are talking about the agriculture production on the ground and sea, but we also are talking about the consumption part, which is food loss and waste, and which is the whole diet topic. Just to give some figures, and I think even we are at the climate COP, 80% of deforestation is caused by unsustainable food production, 70% of biodiversity loss, and also to emphasize what our honored minister has already said, 30% of the global greenhouse gas emissions are coming from food production. And so therefore, we think there is an urgency really to integrate food system, food production in all the three conventions. The one on climate, the one on biodiversity, and the one on land. And having said this, I think we have an exciting time behind us. This was on the way to the UN pre-summit and the UN Food Systems Summit. And we have an exciting time before us. We are here at the climate COP. But next year we will have the biodiversity COP and we will have the land COP. And these are major opportunities. And having said that, with the UN Food Systems Summit, we have developed the pathways. We had the national dialogues, we have the national pathways, we had discussions with all stakeholders. And we got out of this summit with a really set of ambition, groundbreaking and game-changing solutions. WWF has been involved in one of the 5 action tracks, the one on boosting nature-positive production, where we considered, which we define as protect nature from further land conversion. Nature-positive production is about sustainable management of food production, and that's very important also, it's all about restoration and rehabilitation of degraded land, and especially soils. But the question is, what are the next steps? And let me go a little bit more inside in the 3 conventions. We are here at the Climate COP. I have seen the cover text today. There is nothing about agriculture and even nothing about food production. So what we want to see is at the COP27 really food in the center of the convention. There are some, let's say, encouraging signs. Last Saturday, there was the launch of the policy action on repurpose agri-food support, which was launched by the UK government, and also one of the initiatives we get out of the UN Food Systems Summit, or supported by the UN Food Systems Summit coalitions. There was the pledge on deforestation. But, and now my but if you look at the nationally determined contribution, there is still a huge gap. There is something, or there's more and more getting on the agriculture production, but there is still the huge gap on getting ambition target also for the consumption part, which means on food loss and waste and on the diets. And the same is with the Coronivia, which is under the UNFCCC. The Coronivia will renew, or is in the process to renew their mandate, and this is also still on agriculture. Happily, they integrated mitigation now in the draft paper, which will be discussed in June next year. But here again, we have really to integrate the food system approach. But let me come to the biodiversity COP. Here it's the same. If we talk about the Rio Conventions, the biodiversity one has the same importance for food system transformation. We have the first draft, and maybe those of you who have been more involved had a look on this. There is a target 10, and the target 10 at the moment only speaks about agriculture. So we only speak once again only about the production, but we need to consider also the consumption part. And I hope that on the way to the biodiversity COP next year, we will integrate the food system approach stronger in the next draft, maybe the draft 2 of the Global Biodiversity Framework. And the third huge and important convention is the one to combat desertification. And there is a strong linkage to the outcome of the UN Food System Summit, especially through the outcome of Action Track 3, where we have considered the overall restoration. So we have two strong coalitions, one on restoration of grassland and savannas and rangelands, and we have a coalition on soil. The global the initiative for global action on soil health. So there is this very, very strong linkage, and we hope, and we are working with UNCCT together to integrate the soil topic and to connect the outcomes of the UN Food System Summit with the conventions. And I see that Eduardo is here, just to mention. There is also the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, where we also see a very strong linkage with the outcome of the UN Food System Summit and what's going on in the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. So there are a lot of this momentum, and let me close. What do we need? First of all, we need to integrate food systems in all the 3 conventions. Secondly, we want to see a food day, a full day only on food at the Biodiversity COP, at the UNCCD COP, and then the COP27 on climate. So if we won't do this, we will not achieve the 1.5 target. And we need to strengthen implementation on the ground at national, regional, and local level. And it's great to be here because that's where you get the finance for this, hopefully. And let me close. I think what we need is these global rules and regulation, but implementation will always happen on the ground. Implementation for the SDGs will not be at a global level, it will be at local level. I'm very optimistic. I'm optimistic at this conference. We discuss about food here. We had a lot of events in our Panda Pavilion. We had the launch of the policy action agenda, and I'm looking very optimistic to the biodiversity and the land conference. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Martina. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I share your optimism, and thank you for really highlighting how all of the Rio Conventions each are related to food. And it's really mind-boggling that food isn't part of this, because it's just so obvious. And as someone personally who's worked for the last decade in both working on the ground with the community, agricultural communities, as well as in more urban ecosystems, talking about and working on sustainable food consumption, it's just so obvious that food is related to climate change, to biodiversity loss, to land degradation. So yeah, it's this is a starting point, so let's go from here. And I also liked how you talked about localization and the importance of addressing those challenges on the ground, because you're absolutely right. We're gonna see the actual change in the implementation at the ground level, and therefore it's imperative that every single stakeholder is involved, most especially those who are most affected and at the ground level. So thank you once again. With that, we shall invite our next panelist, who is online. So it's Juan Lucas Restrepo from the CGIAR. So if Juan's going to join us online.
Here,
Yes.
I hope you can see and hear me. Okay, great. No, it's very good to be here today in this, I think, very nice and interesting meeting, working precisely as we just heard on why food and why the three conventions should be connected through food. Unfortunately, I'm not there with you today, but I was in Glasgow for about 5 days, and food was the talk in the corridors, inside meetings, etc. It's a growing theme, and there is great clarity on food as something that needs to be addressed very seriously to meet these, of course, outcomes and goals of this convention. And of course, we all know that food comes today, unfortunately, at the expense of nature and climate. They are related to biodiversity loss, deforestation, fresh water withdrawal, a big source of greenhouse emissions, and even by causing so much cost, we are not even being able to feed adequately the many foods mouths around, and we saw last year that more than 800 million people were hungry. So it's an interconnected crisis of climate change, environmental degradation, and with widespread malnutrition. So we need to work at the nexus of climate, biodiversity, and land degradation, the objectives of the three Rio Conventions. As we heard from Martina, we address this in a deeper manner in the UNFSS, especially in the managed area of Action Track 3, where we came with a number of solutions. Martina mentioned a few, and I want to focus on two of these important solutions that work at this nexus and can help these conventions bridge gaps and connect in a more siloless manner, which is agrobiodiversity as a solution and agroecological transformation, both relying on each other. So we know the current model was good for the past, but its costs are excessive, and this is why the transformation is necessary. And it has cost agrobiodiversity significantly in a similar manner of this rapid loss of biodiversity. We're seeing a rapid loss of agrobiodiversity. So we're losing the tools to provide solutions, and that lack of agrobiodiversity in the field and in the diet is, of course, supporting in a negative manner the environmental degradation and not generating enough opportunities for the rural poor and their communities. So the solution, what needs to bring all of us together, is making sure we work for, it sounds simple, but it's complicated, and more diverse, nutrient-rich diet that's sourced from diversified landscapes that produce new livelihood opportunities for communities, and at the same time increase resilience and provide critical ecosystem services. Agrobiodiversity is a tool, it's a solution in the toolkit of this nexus. And I would like to take the opportunity, and you see my backing today, to invite you to the second International Agrobiodiversity Congress that's led not only by CGIAR, but from all of the conveners that brought us here today, where we will understand its linkage to innovation, to forgotten foods, to indigenous food systems, and how scientists are providing new evidence, new knowledge, new solution pathways to mainstream agrobiodiversity back into the food system. And this is only one solution, and the other one is all this institutional change that's happening around in all of the dialogues. One of those is CGIAR change. CGIAR has been supporting and backstopping a lot of the good elements of the Green Revolution, but of course, costs are more than the value generated at the moment. So CGIAR is rethinking itself and developing a prospectus of efforts One of them, to give you an example, is taking a leadership role on an agroecological transformation research for development initiative, where our objectives are many, such as improving ecosystem health, increasing social inclusion and equity, and improving innovation processes that really take into account local knowledge. So only having CGIAR with all its history, thinking that way into the future is really signaling that we need to work in this nexus in order to solve this interconnected crisis. So I just want to finalize by saying that in order to achieve these goals, not only to bring food in the center of these discussions, but to seek solutions, we need, of course, more investment in research and innovation to scale up all of these approaches. So we really support as CGIAR the president's campaign, the UK campaign on transforming agricultural innovation for people, nature, and climate, and call upon governments, the private sector, and investors to really increase our investments to help build a food system that nourishes people with adequate, affordable, and healthy diets that are produced sustainable within planetary boundaries. All from my side today. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Juan Lucas, for sharing that with us and for once again highlighting how important this nexus of climate change, biodiversity loss, and land degradation is to address, especially in terms of creating those healthy food systems. And absolutely, we need more investment in the research and the innovation that will lead to the creation of better food systems for all. And I think what's also really important is to bring about that mindset change that looks at and understands that investing in creating sustainable and healthy food systems is lucrative, because at the end of the day, it's going to positively impact every single person. And if it does that, it's also going to boost the economy. So really creating that whole sustainable process of bringing about benefits for the environment, society, and the economy. So thank you once again for sharing your views with us. I do not think Mo will be joining us, our other panelists. So before I go on to the responses and reflections from our other panelists, I will open the floor for questions from the audience. So if you have any burning questions, we see a hand there. So please feel free to ask.
My name is Isifu Sulemana. I'm from Ghana, precisely a local community called Walwale. I have a few questions, but first I want to comment GEF. I was happy to see it. Through their small grant programs, they're able to support a lot of farmers on the ground. And I want to say they are doing a very good job. Through them, I'm also a farmer. I'm an organic farmer. So myself and my group have ever benefited. We have been able to develop some local innovations that are relevant to agriculture through GEF support. And I want to turn them up. I want to encourage them to continue to reach out to more farmers on the ground. Now, few questions. I want to give much more courtesies to my honorable minister. I was so happy. I heard his speech. I heard a speech. The key word is we need to invest so much in agriculture, and I support that. The representative from World Food also mentioning that we need regulations, but that's at the global level. Implementations are done on the ground. That's another key word. Now my question is, the two combined. I've heard our ministers in all the forums speaking, and everybody is calling for developed countries to increase, to make their commitment, their funds available to us so that we're able to adapt. I want to find out from my honorable minister and also this panel, have we thought of a plan B as an Africans in the event that this international bodies, developed countries, what they promise, in case something happens, and what they promise is not forthcoming, what do we do to make our food system more resilient, more sustainable? Can we have a plan B in the event that they don't give what they promise is not forthcoming? We're able to live on our own. This is one thing I want to hear. So as a farmer, I want to hear what is it that, in the absence of all these plenty promises, our ministers, our countries, our government can do to support me, to myself and my farmers, to be more resilient in the midst of all this climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. Yes, would you like to go ahead, Minister?
Thank you very much. It's a very important question. If at all we don't have the pledge, the promise, I think we as Africans, we have to take ownership. We should ensure that our government funds our small-scale farmers. So at least our national budget, we have to cater for the small-scale farmers. As a country or as a Minister of Agriculture in the Gambia, most of our farmers, we support them with inputs, fertilizer at a subsidized price, whereby at least farmers can have access to fertilizer. And we ensure that they have a market whereby they can sell their produce. So in such, I think we need to take ownership to our own activities to ensure that small-scale farmers are empowered. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Minister. Would any of our panelists like to answer, or?
Can I chip in?
Yes.
Okay, no, I think it's a great question, and I'm going to take out my CGIR hat for a moment and tell you that I come from a National Agricultural Research and Innovation Institute from the South, from Colombia, and I feel to respond to our friend in Ghana that we, of course, all of the international commitments and pledges and investments are going to be absolutely critical. But if we do not make efforts in strengthening local institutions, especially our own research capacities, and in the case of Colombia, in about 9 years, we managed to move my institution with national budget, just reprioritizing scarce resources from working with 40 PhDs to 200, which for a national institution is great. And we developed a territorial innovation systems framework to bring closer the work of our scientists to knowledge on the ground, on the farmers, and being able to link efforts with the private sector, with territorial entities, and the government support, of course. So what I'm saying is that investment north to south is absolutely critical, but governments also need to prioritize and give, a strong emphasis on strengthening the enabling environment for food system transformation in the national level. If we get funds, great, especially if the local institution is set up to use those funds wisely and leverage them in a good manner. So it's a two-way stream, and we need strong institutions at the base for food systems transformation.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Would either of you like to answer? So.
Yeah, just on your plan B, I think we don't have the time for a plan B. So let's stay with the plan A, first of all. Secondly, totally agree and to support smallholder farmers in your country, but also in other parts of the world. I think this is urgent. And I mentioned this launch of the policy action agenda to repurpose subsidies. And I think this is also a very important topic, which at the end will be on the governments in the country level. But if you consider globally about this 700 billion of subsidies, only a small portion is really going into environmental sound, environmental sustainable agriculture production. And we feel very happy that through this UN Food Systems Summit, there is a coalition to start the discussion and how we could really repurpose the subsidies, that it goes to local, it goes to smallholder farmers, and it helps us to improve biodiversity, climate and land. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Patricia, you wanted to answer as well, and then I saw another raised hand.
Okay, thank you very much. And I would like to respond to your question. I happened to attend the AGRF's UN Food Summit that happened in Kenya, and we saw a lot of African government leaders pledged to transform food systems. And one of the key points that rose during the summit was the issue to do with food loss in Africa. Africa is capable and it has potential to produce food, but the only challenge that Africa faces is on food storage, food loss and waste. And some of the key issues that we can do in our countries back is to question and make our leaders to be accountable in ensuring that the system and the markets are suitable to ensure a smallholder farmer, after they have harvested their tomatoes, they do not go to waste. And there are so many ways in which we can do as part of our plan B in ensuring we have value addition, turning tomato into tomato sauce to ensure the value chain does not end at the farm, but we can have something meaningful from that. And another key thing that rose from ensuring that Africa strengthens the food system is on ensuring that we have agricultural, environmental clubs in schools, in ensuring that we raise a generation that understands what we mean by sustainable land use practices, and ensuring the kids at tender age have knowledge on agriculture so that they can pass to other communities. I think if we tap on agricultural information and markets in Africa, that will be our plan B, because we are capable of producing food. The only question is, how do we store and how do we ensure the value chain is efficient? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the question about self-sufficiency. I think it's really important and not discussed enough, so thank you for bringing that up. I do see a question, so yes.
Thank you for the opportunity. I wish to just seek maybe a contribution from the good presenters, that when we talk of the food systems, the food is maybe at the end after production, and this is what we prepare and consume. Maybe we have also to consider that the same food systems has a lot of impacts on biodiversity loss. All over the world, the food that has to be consumed after the agricultural systems has to be prepared using energy. As our presenter there has mentioned, there is also a lot of food wastage. How do we ensure that in these systems that we are able to conserve energy and protect our biodiversity? You find that the people who prepare food using fuel wood, there is a lot of loss in the small species of leaf vegetation because it's being used for preparation of food. We also have a lot of wastage because of exploitation of trees on forests so that it can be converted to fuel wood. So this is an interconnected system that is also contributing a lot to issues of climate change because of the preparations and the wastages. So maybe we could also integrate a lot on the reuse and the recycling of this food so that it can also give back for the biodiversity loss, while also putting in place mechanisms to have more biodiversity on areas where we are using cook fuel. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that question. And we'll take another question and then give the floor to the panelists. Yes.
Thank you very much. I am Momodou Rijalo. I work in the Ministry of Environment as advisor to the minister. The issue you have mentioned about GHG, greenhouse gas emission, saying that agriculture is responsible for about 30% of greenhouse gas emissions. all over. I think it's an important thing to reflect on. The main culprits, I believe, are paddy production, that is a popular practice in agriculture, paddy production, as well as livestock farming. Okay, how fast and effective are transformative efforts and mechanisms? How far are they in reaching the communities? Because these are practices that are very common, that are very popular, and it is very difficult keeping them away from drifting away from conventional practices. Now, what measures have you got to address, to ensure that we drift away from convention to transformative practices whereby greenhouse gas emissions can be reduced significantly? Okay.
Great. Thank you for that question. We'll give the floor to our panelists. Juan, Lucas, I know you're online, so just feel free to jump in if you have an answer, but would any of our panelists like to begin by answering? Yes, go ahead.
I think I can add my voice. Mr. Jallo, thank you very much for that question. In fact, that's why I mentioned it in my statement. I said climate-smart agriculture, we need to introduce that one. Because apart from that, it will be difficult for us to address that issue. So the small-scale farmers, animal tractions or planting on their bare land is the solution for the small-scale farmers. But using machineries and others, that also can cause a lot of problem. So smart agriculture is the solution. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Panelists.
Maybe to reflect on the question on the linkage of food system and renewable energy, I think there is a huge potential, not only on fuel, firewood for fuel, but it's also on the whole topic on food waste and food loss. So if we turn in hot countries to refrigerator, the question is where's the energy coming from? And this is also something to consider, and I think we have to have a deeper dive on this linkage on food system transformation and connect with renewable energy. So your question and your input, thanks a lot for this here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the answers. And I'd actually like to answer your question as well. I think it's a really important one to reflect what my fellow panelists have said, and it does require a collaborative effort to ensure that agricultural communities also have access to clean energy that powers their sustainable climate-smart agriculture. And in my line of work, very often we've seen how installing, for instance, solar irrigation systems to practice climate-smart agriculture is very beneficial for farmers, as well as ensuring that women, for instance, in several agricultural communities have solar cookers that allow them to not use the fuel that affects their health as well as the health of the environment, but is beneficial for all. So yeah, just wanted to quickly answer that, but thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for your question as well. So if we don't have any more answers from our panel, then I see a question that is over there. So yes, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I want to take this opportunity to thank my Honorable Minister, Amie Fabureh, and the rest of the panelists for the brilliant presentations you've made here. My question, I don't know if it is a question or a comment, but it's in relation to food system and women. When we talk about food, by the way, I am the gender focal point at the Ministry of Agriculture and in the Gambia also. When we talk about food systems, we have women at the beginning, at the level of production. We have women in the middle, that is food preparation and everything. When we consumption, we also talk about women. And my minister has spoken about investing in climate change, investing in production, transformative production to improve food production and to increase food production and to improve the nutrition of our communities and their livelihoods. My concern is we really, really need to have these women. When we talk about investing, our national incomes, our budgets, we really need to include budgets for improved and diverse agricultural production in our budgets, but we also need to bring the people that matter, the smallholder farmers, the women at the table where the decisions are made. They really need to participate in decision making, and investments need to be directed to them because they are the people who really matter when we talk about production, productivity, and food systems in general along the value chain. I don't know if the panelists have anything to add to what I have just said, but I think considering women at all these levels in terms of investment is really, really important. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that very important point and comment. Do we have any other questions before we give it to the floor? If not, okay, yes, we have one more. Oh, he has a question? Okay, yes.
No, it's a comment.
Oh, comment, go ahead.
I just want to agree with everyone here that we need to act fast and now. Because if you look at the main organ that supports the food system, which is the soil, and this happens to be the bank of smallholder farmers, is already affected by climate change. If you talk about temperatures, is the soil. If you talk about salt intrusion, salinity is the soil. If you talk about flood, is the soil. You know, if we talk about all the vagaries of weather and the climate is affecting the soil, and this happens to be the bank of the climate. This is why I always say, unlike the coronavirus, climate change has no vaccine. The only vaccine is to go smart against it. And this is what we need to do. This is why I agree with somebody who said we have to support research, innovation, and so. I agree with somebody also who said that we need to recycle. System integration and recycling. That's the way forward. This all culminate into affecting or maybe trying to decline the production of food, fisheries, livestock, and even including the destruction of the infrastructures, energy infrastructure, roads infrastructure for transportation of this food, and causes a lot of post-harvest losses. In third world countries, if there is any interruption in the energy system, a lot of food goes wasted. So we have to look at it at a holistic way and then try to approach it in a holistic manner. I think these are the nutrition, for example, is affected. In fact, we are recently, the Ministry of Agriculture is trying to promote what we call agriculture-sensitive nutrition. Because we believe that the medical therapies, the pharmaceutical supplements are costly. They cannot even reach most remote parts of, countries, villages in the rural areas. But with the food-based approach, where farmers can easily exchange germplasm, especially, example, in a wedding ceremony, for example. A farmer will just go around the backyard and, oh, where do you get this cassava, for example? Can I have one cotton at no cost? So these are the kind of things, these are the kind of the smart things that we need to promote to be able to tackle climate change. This is my contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I see one question here, and then we'll give it to the floor to the panelists.
I'm happy to hear all these comments. I always say that as a farmer, I always feel like sharing my experience with forums like this. If you want to appreciate what we go through, then I will invite you to come down and hold the hole with us and do it yourself. Then you can appreciate what we go through. I had renewable energy. Yes, everyone is preaching that in practicing climate-smart agriculture, we need to incorporate renewable energy. But the question is, it is not something that goes well with us as farmers. Why am I saying so? And I think it's a policy issue. A political decision needs to be taken. A strong policy needs required. It's very expensive. Myself and my farmer group, we tried several times to acquire solar pump just to tap underground water for our vegetable farming. it took us almost 2 years before we could buy one. That was 20,000 Ghana cedis. 20,000 Ghana cedis to acquire one solar pump to pump water, not for the whole field, but for a section of the field. Yes, with this, in 2 years down the line, the system broke down. So I asked myself a question. As a farmer, with this terrible experience, how will somebody convince me that it's a way to go? It is not a way to go because it wasn't friendly to us as farmers. That's one. Two, it's too expensive. So if my honorable minister is here, probably you are part of African ministers. Amie, I know there's a dialogue going on. These are some of the things we request as farmers. That yes, if our government can be committed, subsidized to make it cheaper, extremely cheaper, there is no way we farmers won't go in for it. But as we stand now, it's all about talking. But on the ground, it's different. I'm sorry to say that. Maybe you can let them hear. We are also saying the same thing to our government in Ghana. That yes, we really show real commitment. When I was coming, I looked at the environment and I was observing in the train. I saw an agrarian society that is well organized. In my place, it's not so. We can also get to this level by organizing ourselves very well. But that is at the local level. We can do it ourselves. But there are some that we need a real political decision to be able to do that. And the typical example is what I've just mentioned. For instance, if in Walla Walla in my community, where almost 90% we are all farmers, whether you've gone to school or you've not been to school, whether you're a dropout or you went up to university level, that is what we do. If you can support and make those things, those decisions, and make those renewable energy that supports sustainable agriculture and food system cheaper, why not? You will get all of us engaged in it. We will not run away. We will not move to the cities to be looking for jobs that are not in existence. This is what I want to say. So with this, what are you doing as African leaders in case all that they are promising us are not coming again? And it is not about talking. There are times I intentionally pick our national budget and look at what is going into an agriculture. That is what actually demonstrates that what they said, what they have been saying in politics, in political platforms, in international forums, they are really, really committed in doing it. This is what I want to say. So going further, what are the plans? What do you think? And how can we get there? Thank you very much.
Thank you for that
let
question.
me
Yes, of course.
Thank you very much for that important question. I think African leaders are different. They are different. Countries are different. But if you come to Gambia, it's different from what you mentioned. Because Gambia, we have a lot of subsistence farmers whom you know that the government is supporting them. You mentioned of a pump system. We have quite a number of garden schemes in the Gambia that belong to subsistence farmers, especially the women farmers and even male farmers. But government is supporting them to establish those gardens so that they can be self-sufficient in food production, especially vegetables and the fruits. So your points are noted. You are from Ghana. Anytime we meet at that forum, I will raise that issue. But we are not placing ourselves as a Gambian, but we are supporting our small-scale farmers to have adequate water to irrigate their vegetable garden schemes and to ensure that they have access to markets. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Would any of our other panelists like to address this question or any of the other comments that were made? Juan, Lucas, Martina, you can go ahead. And then maybe Juan. Is Juan Lucas still with us? I think so. If not, then Yes, Martina, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks a lot, first of all, for this great and inspiring input. And just two things on the gender. I think gender was a very, very important topic in the UN Food System Summit, and I'm very, very happy. And you see here we are very, very on the good side of the gender. And I think without the women on the ground and the young people, we will not solve the problem. So thanks a lot, and also I think pointing out the importance of soil improvement, soil health. I think this is more than urgent, and I'm very optimistic looking forward and looking at the outcome of the UN Food System Summit, as already mentioned, the UNCCD COP, the UN Decade and Ecosystem Restoration. I think soil is really in the center of the discussions now, and thanks for emphasizing this importance also for the smallholder farmers.
Amazing, thank you so much. Don't know if there's anyone else answering, but okay, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, to close as well, I think it's always great to hear from the farmers' voices because they are, critical stakeholders for change to happen. Without change at that level of the food system, we will never achieve our targets. So maybe couple of comments from what we heard. The first one, again, is that there are alternative pathways that need to help the food system transition. It's not green revolution, but it's more agroecological intensification. But agroecological transformation is a really important pathway that where we see, for example, this coalition has already support of 28 countries. I think it's the highest number of governments that are backing solutions coming from the UN Food System Summit, and more than 30 organizations supporting that coalition. So that should help bring knowledge and change to the ground, meeting all the principles of agroecology agreed by the CFS. So that's one thing. The second one is, again, on the soils. And the numbers are terrible. On average, between 20 and 60% of the carbon stocks in the soil are lost if you compare land before it was being cultivated than under the current cultivation. So we need to be very strong in not allowing for any kind of investment that degrades both the carbon and the biodiversity in soils, and make sure those investments, on the contrary, promote regeneration and building back soil health as a priority for humanity. And the last thing is that so you hear a lot of frustration in these discussions, but more and more the investments, the development cooperation is linking more clearly to impact. And in the case of CGIAR, I cannot speak on behalf of others, this new prospectus, this new way of working, our research initiatives have very clear outcomes in terms of livelihoods, in terms of climate, in terms of nutrition, etc. And huge numbers, millions of farmers, mainly, that will be benefiting from the outcomes of these research efforts for development. If we don't deliver, we don't get the funding for our activities, which should be how things work. So we need a lot of accountability to make sure little or large, hopefully very large investment flows that are needed make change on the ground, and there is clear accountability on how those resources were used in an effective manner.
Amazing, thank you so much. Before I go ahead to any other questions, how are we doing on time? Okay, I'll take one more question, and then from the lady in front, and then we shall hear from our respondents. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. My name is Milka Wanjiru from Kenya, working at the local government on water environment. I like the conversation about food production, but I want just to make a comment that there's no food production without water. And when we speak about food production, when we speak about climate smart agriculture, when we speak about irrigation, we're talking about water, whether storm water, whether rain, or whether, the underground water. I'm just having a concern because we're really insisting on the climate met agriculture and irrigation. The question is that we are getting this water from maybe underground, from the rivers, or from, the wells. And we all understand that our aquifers are depleting. I would want to know how then are we integrating this sustainable use of water towards food systems, towards good agricultural production, so that we ensure, even if we're doing climate smart agriculture, we don't deplete our aquifers, we don't, what is it that the program is doing to ensure that our waters, we don't deplete our aquifers? I would want to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. Panelists, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I have my environment minister with me here, Honorable Diba. Yesterday we were discussing that they want to make some investigation so that they will know how it will affect our Gambian water, because we have a lot of boreholes in the country. So they want to do some studies to know the outcome of that. I think it's a very important question, but as a minister or ministry, we want to ensure that we introduce drip irrigation, because that one you can control your water, how to irrigate your vegetables or fruit trees. So using that, I think it can minimize the effect. So I think that's what I have. Maybe Mr. Diba, if you have anything to add.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I think this is a very relevant question, because when we talk of climate, we're talking about water. Climate is the focus is water. Now, so long as we want to have smart agriculture, we want to be innovative about our production and productivity in our various countries, we must also see that we are dealing with a finite resource. Water is a finite resource that needs to be managed. And the water management regime must be such that it recycles itself. We look at the hydrological cycle, how we can support that cycle of regenerating water from the underground to create more water sets in our region so that it can be sustainable. So without sustainable water management, it will be difficult to enhance production and productivity. But so long as we want to be innovative, now there are a lot of technologies that can be used. This is why in our intervention as least developed countries or developing countries, we would want to access resources and technology. Because without technology, it will be difficult for us to institute these measures to ensure production and productivity. But as he said in the Gambia, we, as environment authorities, we're becoming concerned about the number of boreholes that are being sunk to see what is the impact of that on our aquifer. Because the aquifer that we are sitting on is something that is linked, that is transboundary, and others are also drawing from it. So what is the effect of all this on our aquifer, and how sustainable it is in the near future? So I think with this, we should be able to have a solution to all these problems relating to production and productivity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ministers, for sharing that with us. If any of our other panelists would like to answer. Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, on the water, I agree pretty much with what has been said, and in terms of making sure there is, the most efficient use of water, and that implies technology, it implies regulation, it implies defining governance across different scales. So that's all very important. But I want to come back to other tools that are critical and that are already being used that relate to agrobiodiversity. So it's not only the diversity of crops in a production system that allow for it to be more resilient, but it's also unlocking knowledge from all these great gene banks and agrobiodiversity to identify those traits that are critical to face these issues, such as water stress tolerance. And CGR has developed over the past years a significant number of crops that are water stress tolerant, that require less input of water, that have shorter planting cycles, so they adapt better to how rainfall patterns are changing. And these tools are being used at large scales, but there is not enough of those. So we need to keep unlocking new knowledge from this agrobiodiversity and making sure it lands very fast in the farmers' fields.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And thank you for all of your questions. They're so relevant, so needed to be addressed like today, and actually yesterday. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for that. And with that, I shall give the floor to our respondents to share their reflections with us. And first, I would like to invite Patricia to share her reflections and views with us. Over to you, Patricia.
Okay, thank you very much. And from the interaction that we've had, we've been able to see that climate change, biodiversity loss, and soil depletion is a threat to humankind, and both must be addressed to ensure we strengthen our food systems. And to reflect on UNCCD COP15, one of the key issues of discussion will be soil, because we cannot talk about strengthening food system without addressing the state of the soil. And as we all know that a third of agricultural soil has been lost over the 40 years. And we need to transform how we treat our soil. It is one of the key topics which is often left out when we are discussing about biodiversity, about climate. And at UNCCD COP15, which will happen next year in Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire, soil will be one of the key issues of discussion to ensure that as much as we're trying to strengthen our food systems, we are also protecting our soil, because soil is at the heart of agricultural production. And secondly, to meet the growing and changing diversities of food, fiber, and able to get nutritional value in our ecosystem, in our everyday life, we need equal impact on food security. And the question is, how are we able to integrate the 3 Rio Conventions to ensure we address food security, we mitigate climate action, and also we reduce biodiversity loss? And I will give a reflection on what United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification is doing. And this is towards promoting food, feed, and fiber, which is a campaign that UNCCD has been carrying in ensuring that they create awareness on the impact of food, the impact on feed, that is in livestock, and fiber, in ensuring that we do not only strain one system, but to integrate to ensure it's sustainable. And second is the scale on restoration of the global and the large scale restoration of degraded landscapes. And we've seen what United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification is doing in the Sahel region through the Great Green Wall. It is not only on restoring ecosystem, but it will have a major impact on our food systems, especially we from Africa, because through restoration, we are addressing biodiversity, and we are also addressing ecosystem restoration. And we all know that nature-based solutions are key in food systems, in mitigating climate action, and also in addressing biodiversity loss. And what we can reflect is that we need the 3 conventions to work together in addressing climate change and also food systems, because if the climate is not suitable, biodiversity is not well catered for, the ecosystem will not support our food systems. And as we all know, in our African context, we depend basically or mostly on our indigenous food. And if we fail to protect our ecosystem and our biodiversity, it means our indigenous food, which has 70% of the nutritional value we are talking in the food system, it will mean we are all losing the track. We might be having food, but without the nutritional value that is needed. So in COP15, we are keen to see the three Rio work together in addressing some of these key issues, but the key point will be addressing soil, because in other years we've seen how soil has been neglected, and now we've taken a keynote on water, which will work to ensure it is included in COP15, because we cannot leave water while we are talking about soil, and we cannot leave both of them when addressing food system. So thank you very much, and looking forward to meaningful engagement at COP15 in Côte d'Ivoire. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Amazing. So our next respondent is David Cooper. So the floor is yours. You have, yes.
Thanks so much. And I'm David Cooper from the Convention on Biological Diversity. It's an honor to join this panel, and I want to pay tribute to the earlier speakers for the rich contributions, and in particular to the Honourable Minister from Gambia and her colleague, the Honourable Minister for the Environment from Gambia. Firstly, it's great that you're both here together, showing these linkages between the food agenda and the broader environmental agenda, and I'm going to, of course, focus on biodiversity, but also in demonstrating how you can have ambitious climate policies by investing in solutions in agriculture, in rice, in livestock, and in particular in giving prominence to the role of subsistence farmers, which I'm going to come back to. And this is important. I mean, you've demonstrated why it's important for land degradation, for climate change, and for biodiversity. For biodiversity, I've said this many times before, nothing is more important than the way we manage our food and agricultural systems. And why is this? Well, it's because, on the one hand, producing food in various ways will impact on the land, on the seas, on our rivers. In fisheries, it may be from taking too much, from overfishing. In agriculture, of course, through pollution from pesticides, from excess nutrients, and of course, above all, through expansion and through land clearing. On the other hand, we all eat, and all our food production depends on biodiversity. It's biodiversity that makes it nutritious, and it's biodiversity that allows us to produce it. So given this dependency, we have to be very optimistic that we find a win-win, that we can transform our agricultural systems and therefore reduce the drivers of biodiversity loss, reduce the drivers of climate change, and reduce the drivers of land degradation. So biodiversity can help us in doing that, right? By using more nutritious species, more nutritious varieties, races of livestock and so on. But also by using biodiversity for pest control, natural enemies instead of pesticides. This can not only help us reduce pesticide use, it helps us increase productivity. And of course, protecting our pollinators for those crops that are dependent on pollination. Many of them, the yield is actually lower than it should be because pollinators the abundance and the diversity of pollinators has been weakened. So we're very pleased and we welcome this Coalition for Food Systems Transformation through Agroecology that was supported at the recent UN Food Systems Summit, especially as it supports, builds upon, and will reinforce, we hope, the 13 principles of agroecology that have been developed through the Committee on Food Security and its high-level panel of experts. And I want to pay tribute here also to the Rome-based agencies, FAO and the other agencies in Rome, not only because Eduardo is in the front row here, but because of the strong collaboration we've had over many years between the CBD and FAO. And in fact, a few months ago, FAO hosted a summit on bringing the agriculture sector and the biodiversity sector together and to discuss inputs into the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. We have, I think, every opportunity as we develop that framework, as others have said, to strengthen further the links between biodiversity, food and agriculture. Now, agroecology, we think, it's getting momentum once again, but it's not really new, right, as an issue. It's been something that has been studied and worked on for many years. Under the CBD, we have a program of work on agricultural biodiversity. The FAO have developed many plans of action on the various elements of the genetic resources that support food and agriculture. And more fundamentally, farmers around the world have been practicing agroecology for hundreds and thousands of years. And the problem is, or at least part of the problem is, we haven't invested in their efforts. And often, in fact, we've done the opposite. We've invested in ways that work against having biodiversity on farms by promoting simplification, by promoting overuse of fertilizers, and by promoting overuse of pesticides, by valuing calories more than nutrients, and many other things that our incentive systems do. And this is subsidies, this is direct cash that governments pay out. It's also the priorities in our research systems, our development systems. So let us look at those subsidies, let us repurpose them to support small-scale farmers, the subsistence farmers, to support small-scale fishers, and think of how we can, through participatory research, further build on their own innovations. We need to see the farmers, the paysans, the campesinos of the world have a much greater role in determining the way we go forward. I've talked mostly about production, and we were reminded earlier that we also have to look at consumption. We will not be able to achieve all of the Sustainable Development Goals, including food security, including protection of biodiversity, including combating land degradation and climate change, if we don't also look at the consumption side. We will have to moderate, reduce overconsumption by those who are over-consuming, particularly meat products. But at the same time, we've got to make sure that everyone has access to good and nutritious food. Part of that is investing in production. And incidentally, whilst most of the calories we produce and most of the food for animals we produce are produced by large farmers in quite uniform landscapes, most of the nutrients we produce and the food we produce for people is produced by small farmers in more diverse landscapes. We need to also, of course, reduce food waste. But if we're going to do all of these things, we've also got to examine this issue of cheap food. We're concerned that as we demand more from farmers and that we put increased pressures on land, that food prices could increase. And of course, there are many, many people that then cannot afford to pay that. But how can we expect farmers to produce what's needed if they don't have a reasonable income? So we do need to look at other ways of making sure that people have access to food, whether that's through the way food markets work, whether it's looking at universal basic income or other income support. We need to look at these equity issues as well if we're going to solve these problems. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, David, for sharing that with us. And we now have a special message from Anis Kalibata, who is the Special Envoy of the UN Secretary General for the Food Systems Summit. So I think Anis is connecting with us online.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Very good. Thank you for having me, and I really want to congratulate you on this powerful conversation. And I was happy to see that we have a number of people from here from the continent. I was at the convention yesterday at the COP26, but I left yesterday. But I'm really happy to be part of this. Now, I want to appreciate what the minister from Gambia was put on the table, especially the fact that she does recognize the interconnection between the three conventions and the food systems summit discussion, and the fact that achieving food security for Africa and many other places where achieving food security is an issue is not going to be possible if we don't get hold of the three Rio Conventions and deliver on them, but also delivering on them is going to depend on how when we deliver on food systems. So for me, the challenge, which kept coming out, and again, really good to hear, the challenge is that food system, agriculture is not equivalent to food systems. Our moderator brought it out very well. Food system is very complex. It is a complexity of institutions that serve the sector. It's a complexity of people and their relationship with natural resources. And it's a complexity of how we use natural resources. So we really need to bring all these things together. And the convention, the three conventions actually do capture all those things. What they don't capture well is how they relate with food systems. So some of the things that I picked that I feel that we really must pay attention to as we go in, and what is at stake here for me, is that as we keep postponing the whole idea of putting foods and food systems at the center of these conversations, we miss the opportunity to recognize that this is the biggest degrader when it comes to biodiversity loss. All of us know the value of biodiversity and how it enhances our lives. Genetic resources is basically what we need to be able to enhance our lives. Whether it's the seeds that farmers use to be able to have a good crop, whether it's how we manage some of the challenges we live with, but also whether it's how we advance our lives in a good way. So really, if you can't address the challenge, bring together the two challenges, the one that leads to 80% degradation, and we talk about it on the fringes or we leave it out of the conversation, then I just wonder whether we are actually hitting the nail on the head. The next bit is, of course, the fact that we are contributing to climate change. 30 years ago when we started these conventions, maybe we didn't know that, maybe we didn't have that fact. But now that we know, what is preventing this year's conversation linking to food systems and building on the efforts of the food systems conversation? I want to thank you, Martina, for bringing out very clearly the character of the conversation, the food systems conversation, where we discussed all the solutions that could be deployed across different areas of the Rios that could actually be solutions. Those are right there. We need to go and build on them. We need to go and exploit them for what they are worth. Rather than, are we going to start over in the conventions and start thinking about different types of solutions when we actually have a whole compendium that was put together? So I really want to encourage us to think about building on, allowing efforts to build on each other. Again, 30 years ago, this may not have been there, but the UN Secretary General called for the Food Systems Summit just to help us understand just how much we have in terms of solutions that we could tap into. And we demonstrated this by putting over 2,500 solutions on the table. Some of them have been turned into coalitions, as Martina was saying, recognizing that no single institution can deliver on this alone. So please, again, my call here and my plea is that we take the opportunity to build on each other's efforts. Let me talk about the lost opportunity when we don't do it. This year, the focus on energy was very clear, and as it should, and that was really good, and brought out a number of things, including clear pathways and frameworks. When we don't talk about things like food and how they impact climate change, we miss the opportunity to discuss the right problems, but also we miss the opportunity to raise the profile of some of the solutions that could be on the table the right way. Adaptation finance, for example, is so behind at about 25% of what it should be, and less than 2% of that makes it to Africa. where there are millions of smallholder farmers, and I'm sure less than 2% of that makes it to other smallholder farmers and businesses as well. Because we are not having the right level of conversation, this continues to be an elusive idea. So for me, that is just to give you an example of what happens when we don't bring the conversation at the table. The other one is raising a global ambition. In the Food System Summit, we raised the ambition. We got 165 heads of state coming forward and making statements around what they will do differently. We had hundreds of pathways put forward. And these are opportunities for us, again, to embed the 3 Rio Conventions and ensure that food is coming through the right way. Here, my offer is we would be interested to work with all the 3 Rio Conventions to ensure that these pathways are reflective of what we want to achieve across the 3, because not achieving them means we don't have food systems. And yet food systems are impacting the conventions as well. So I want to conclude on one thing. I want to recognize that we've been spending all these efforts having conversations and conversations. I want to invite you on one more conversation, which I hope can help us understand what is it that we missed, how can we, going forward, do it better. We do have a COP26 a post-COP26 virtual event in the food systems that will try to really understand what is it about food system that should have been at the table, what did we miss, what was brought out, and how can we strengthen the conversations that you're currently having. So that is happening, and we'll be sending you invites, and we would really want to welcome you to that meeting to hear. It is on 18th of November at 2 p.m. East African time, and we would be interested in your views and ideas. So as I conclude, I'm really hoping that you see the opportunity to work with the Food System Summit to build on the work that we have done. I hope that you see the opportunity to continue linking these issues. And I put out a call, and I'll put this call out today again. I put out a call on the convention, the COP27 that is happening next year, hopefully in Africa. And when it does, I really would like to request and make sure that it actually focuses on the nexus between food systems and these conventions. I know we do have a number of conventions as well. Can we please bring out food systems more? Because bringing out food systems is addressing the right challenges of these conventions. So thank you again for inviting me, and I look forward to having these conversations with you further next week, and in Africa on COP27, which I hope will be about food systems. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Agnes, for sharing that with us. And thank you to all of our panelists and our audience members for your contributions today. I think it's very obvious how our food systems are so intrinsically connected with all 3 of the Rio Conventions. And we've also spoken today in detail about why it's so important we use that multi-layered lens to address and see how we can create more healthy food systems, and also bring in, the issues of pollution, the issues of lack of access to water, and of course, addressing the social inequities that rise with having an unhealthy food system. So why it's so important to have a feminist lens when we're moving towards healthy food systems. And the last but not the least, how important our ground level actions are, that, we are here, we're talking about it. Realities on the ground are very, very different. So it's important that we really bridge the gap between the top down and bottom up processes so that we really ensure that we leave no one behind and make sure that everyone has a life of dignity. And that includes us as human beings and, of course, our planet as well. So thank you for joining us today, and wish you a wonderful rest of the conference. Thank you, everyone.